My name's Laura Jarrell, and you're watching Atheist Ed.
If I believed in past lives, I'd like to think that I was something cute and cuddly, kind of like a little panda bear. Here's some fun facts you may not know about the requirements for entering a Hindu temple. You gotta be clean and washed, check. You gotta take off your shoes, okay. You gotta cover your head, I get that. You can't have any physical or mental handicaps? What? Now I gotta Google this. Hold on. Okay, so the facts are physical and mental handicaps are punishments for wickedness committed in past lives. In fact, many Hindu temples deny entry to disabled people. So I guess I am not able to go to a Hindu temple. I'm out of here.
Let me tell you about the Baptist dogma. Baptist preachers are the only ones directly called by God to preach. Nobody else is allowed to preach. Total immersion in water is the only way to baptize. None of that sprinkling head on the water crap. None of that. Apostasy is impossible. Once you've been baptized, you're saved forever, even if you turn away from God. So atheists like me who were baptized as Baptists still going to heaven. Closed communions. Visitors and non-members of the church are not allowed to receive communion, so don't get hit by a bus Sunday after visiting a Baptist church, I guess. They're arguably the most narrow-minded and bigoted of all Christian denominations, so steer clear.
If you were to guess that the distance between San Francisco and New York City is 20 yards, you would be more correct percentage-wise than young Earth creationists are at guessing the age of the Earth. Do you get that, Carl?
Yeah, I do. I also would not guess that the difference, the distance was 20 yards because I'm not a fucking idiot. There, that's it. There's that.
Oh, we were just talking about this earlier. How was the Quran compiled? A, Muhammad recited it and compiled it into a single book by himself. B, it compiled from fragments written on bones and leaves. C, after Muhammad's death, it was compiled from people who said they had parts of it memorized. D, it was compiled from 4 separate books Muhammad had dictated. Or E, all of the above, somehow.
Well, I think that it was done in the same way that Swedish parents name their children, which is to take a bunch of magnetic letters and throw them on a refrigerator. And whatever comes up, that's what you name the kid. Pretty much the thing with the Quran.
Or I guess the same for the Welsh, except take out all the vowels and then do it. Yeah, so yeah, it's all the above. So somehow Muhammad did it all himself. Oh, and a lot of it was recited. Oh, and a lot of people came up with fragments. And a lot of people came up with memorized stuff that they remembered from decades ago when Muhammad was still alive. So yeah, choose to believe any of those you want or none.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting too that part of this is based on recollection, but they've also put in there, I lie like a motherfucker. Whatever I feel like saying, I'm going to say. So, whatevs.
Takia, that's right.
My takia.
Pregnant women can't go too close to fingernail or toenail clippings or they will have a miscarriage. Ooh, I didn't know that. And if that is the case, oh man, I would never clip my fingernails and toenails if I actually believed that. But I think we got into a place where that's not rational. And I don't think any reasonable Jewish person would actually believe that. And if they do, we should talk to them. We should actually, reach out to them and see if they're okay. Another one. If you transfer your sins into a rooster, swing it over your head 3 times and sacrifice it, you will enter and proceed to a good long life into peace. Okay. Well, I don't have any roosters around, but if I ever became a Jew, I'm pretty sure I would keep a couple spare roosters in my backyard. But to be honest, I'd never become a Jew probably. I would never say never, but also I'm just not too fond of keeping roosters in the backyard. The etrog fruit, I hope I'm saying that, etrog fruit, similar to a lemon, is used in Jewish rituals and can cost between $20 and $500 cash. Also, the juice of an etrog allegedly erases the pain of childbirth. Allegedly. Well, that makes no sense. Look, I'll take that back. There are different plants that offer some kind of relief. Before we had advanced medical science, people tried all kind of things. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. Some of them didn't truly understand how it did. But these things were like miss and hit and miss. And I would say that I wouldn't knock it necessarily, but at face value, I don't accept it. But I would have to look more into that. And if there is something to it, I would like to know. If not, please don't use this fruit to try to relieve childbirth if the science doesn't back it up. So let's go to the next one and the last one. The penalty for eating non-kosher food is 39 lashes with a whip. Ooh, boy, that's some slavery right there for you. The penalty for eating non-kosher food is 39 lashes with a whip. Well, I know some Jews who they got some lashes they missing. I don't really like to talk about lashes because, you know, the whole slavery thing in America and all of this, but if that's the penalty, I would never, ever eat non-kosher if I was a Jew. But also, it's ridiculous. I mean, what if you have a certain diet where you have to eat a certain way? Or what if you are surrounded by a place that doesn't have any kosher food because of circumstances, right? Or you had to flee your country for some particular reason, whatever the case may be. Man, that must be crucial.
Sacred. It's something set apart for religious worship. So by definition, nothing is sacred to us. The closest thing I can think of to use in its place would be awe-inspiring. Yeah, it's really a pretty poor substitution, but I can't actually think of a better one. There just really isn't any equivalent to sacred for someone who doesn't believe in any kind of blessing or non-physical beings. Believe. In the religious context, it means to have a firm religious faith in something. To an atheist, belief is essentially knowing something for a fact without any evidence, which is completely illogical to us. Better would be words like hope, guess, or accept, but I guess that would force you to acknowledge a level of uncertainty about beliefs held without evidence. It's a difficult situation because we are not going to accept anything without evidence, and so much of religion is based on accepting things without evidence. I'm not really sure how we could get past that impasse. Sin. This is a huge one for me. Sin, by definition, is an offense against God. If I don't believe God exists, there is nothing for me to offend. Therefore, I cannot sin. We are not divided down the middle as to whether good and evil are objective or subjective. Causing harm or against social norms would be a start. We do not look at lions and consider them evil beasts, but that is from the perspective of people who have only seen lions in cages or enclosures with thick glass, so they never presented any threat to us. If we were instead, say, a herd of zebra on the African plain, and lions were sizing up our group, deciding which of our children would be their next meal, we would most certainly have a very different opinion of whether lions are evil.
5 questions to ask your priest, pastor, minister, imam, or rabbi. Question number 1. Why did God wait over 5,000 years after the rise of civilization before he delivered the rules we're supposed to be living by? Number 2. When the kangaroos got off the ark, How did they get all the way back to Australia? How did the sloths get back to South America? How did they get to the Ark?
Right?
Number 3, if God loved Abel's cooked meat sacrifice more than Cain's vegetable sacrifice, does he think less of me because I'm a vegetarian? Okay, spoiler, I'm not actually one, but the person that wrote this was.
Right here.
Apparently.
Right here. Yeah, Neil loves his bacon.
Yeah. Number 4, why do bad things happen to good people? You've probably been asked that a million times before, but this time, can you give me an answer that isn't complete horse shit? Number 5, why did Herod send astrologers to find the baby Jesus instead of Roman troops? Wouldn't that have prevented having to slaughter a town full of male infants later?
Things that make you go,
Indeed.
I think there's just so much like that's not logical that you can't explain. But what I think is very powerful is to let religious people know that that fallacy is there, because it's not something that you talk about when you're a religious person. It's not something you hear about when you're in that Christian bubble. Not something I was aware of. So that was a big part of why I started to do YouTube and be a community leader and stuff, because I didn't have access to that education when I was religious. And when I got that education, it led me out of that religious belief. And so I feel like everybody deserves the right to have access to that and make their own decision, just as much as they have the right to be religious if they still want to be. But I think the right to know what you believe and why you believe it is such an important part of that.
Another question I had, which could be part of these questions, is if this God is as all-powerful as they say he is, why did he leave everything to be oral tradition first? Why didn't he just print the fucking book himself? Just snap his fingers, kind of like he did with everything else, and have this book pop into existence that no matter who picked it up, they'd be able to read it in whatever language they spoke. He's God. He could do that. And how come the rest of the planet hadn't even heard of him? Just some little rinky-dink towns in the Middle East somewhere. Nobody in Africa knew. Nobody in fucking South America. Nobody in North America. None of them knew.
Right.
The kangaroo could have put a copy of the book in his pouch and
took it back.
Taken it back, I mean, the sloth would have, I mean, the sloth would have gotten his information to the people the slowest, but it still would have gotten there.
Yeah.
The fucking sloth would have died before he made it to the Ark anyways.
Well, and this is a big part too, where people argue that the text is infallible, and yet there's so much that we don't use anymore, and we pretend isn't there, or religious people pretend isn't there, and it's just so ridiculous, because I made this point before, that there's the usefulness of that book is in the divine revelations and the divine knowledge that it's supposed to give the followers. And so if it's not giving you any useful information, anything new, or anything that they wouldn't have known at the time that it was written, then it's not filling that purpose. It's not useful. It doesn't have any value. And so it's the only thing it's doing is pulling us back into old moral practices. And that's, the opposite of what we need.
Old moral practices like slavery?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, could the story of Jonah and the fish really have happened? I'm going to try my hardest to treat this like a real question. Here we go. There's a book of Jonah in the Old Testament of the Bible, and it talks about Jonah, or Jonas, who's a prophet in the Hebrew Bible. He was called upon God to preach against Nineveh for their atrocities. Jonah kind of noped out, went to Tarshish to board a ship. The ship gets caught in a storm that's sent by Yahweh. the crew's freaking out. Jonah's like, oh my God, it's totally me. Just throw me overboard. And so they do that. Jonah's met with a fish. He spends 3 days in its belly and becomes very uncomfortable. He begins to cry out to God. God has the whale, or the big fish, expel him onto the beach. He's like, all right, go back to Nineveh, preach. Jonah does. That's the biblical story. So, does anybody believe the story? So when you look at Jewish beliefs, they believe it represents the teachings of, and I'm going to butcher this, teshuvah, which is the ability to repent and be forgiven by God. Christians generally see this as a parable of sorts. There are different things that it teaches. One is kind of this first story of the prodigal son, which you see in the New Testament, but there's a couple of prodigal son stories in the OT. Jonah is one of them. Muslims believe that the Jewish and Christian versions of the Bible have been corrupted. So they believe that they have the true text as was given to Muhammad by an angel. They do believe that there was a prophet named Jonah. All Abrahamic religions have the Jonah story. I'm not sure to the extent that Muslims believe that a man can actually be eaten by a whale and spit up and walk around and preach and those things. Jewish beliefs definitely do not, and Christians, it kind of runs along evangelical lines. The scholars, most biblical scholars, do believe that this was purely fictional, and even to the point where one Jewish scholar, in 1995, the Jewish scholar Gildas Hamel proposed that the biblical tale of Jonah and the whale had been created with the intent of adapting and inverting the Greek myth of Jason and the Argonauts. There are a number of parallels between Jason and Jonah. According to Hamel, the biblical authors were attempting to react to the widespread artistic tradition, unrecorded in literature, that Jason had descended into the belly of a great serpent, and through the intervention of the goddess Athena, emerged alive with the monster to claim the golden fleece. So again, this isn't the story of Jason and the Argonauts that's written down. You'll see this mostly in depictions, and if you actually look it up, like the Doris Cup, Douris, has a depiction of Jason being eaten by a great serpent. Other depictions will show him being eaten by a dragon, then again being spit out with the help of the goddess Athena. We can also talk about what scientists believe, which, yeah, haha. I'm not even sure what's being talked about here. I know a lot of the biblical texts today will say that Jonah was eaten by a whale, which is the translation. I'm not gonna butcher that word, but it is 2 words, and it is literally translated as giant fish. When I look at whales that could eat men, Science.com did actually answer this question. The only whale that would be likely capable of swallowing a human would be a toothed whale, specifically the sperm whale. A sperm whale did ram and sink a whale ship in Essex in 1820, but there are no reliable reports of a sperm whale ever eating a human. So when we're looking at what that would look like for the human, it wouldn't be pretty. So there's one, no oxygen. We like oxygen. Our bodies really, really like oxygen. So we're not likely to survive that. And then you're also getting into like the gases, like there's methane, carbon dioxide. I don't know how you breathe in the belly of a whale. And also you have stomach acid, which is like phosphorus chloride, sodium chloride, hydrochloric acid, which would try to digest you. So trying to survive being in the belly of a whale, or if there was some divine intervention where God would empty out the contents of the whale's stomach so that a man could walk around, you're still getting into the lack of oxygen. So scientifically, even with a miracle, I don't see how that's possible. When you also look at the story of Jonah and the whale, it says that the whale spit Jonah up. So even we're talking about this huge miracle where the sperm whale, or whatever kind of whale it is, regurgitates Jonah with what? Yeah. There's no stomach acid, like you can't get him back out. You went to the mouth of a whale, you're pretty much done for. It's not like the cartoons. It's very, very unpretty. Okay, so in summation, scientists do not believe the story of Jonah and the whale as told in the Bible can physically happen. Theologians believe it's nothing more than fiction, and also most of the religion's adherents believe it to be nothing more than a story read for moral purposes. But not all of the adherents believe that it is a fictional story, which brings me to the second part of the page I've been given. Most of us are at least aware of people who believe in a God that can produce miracles to this extent. Along the Bible Belt in the United States, you're most likely to see adherents to biblical literalism. Biblical literalism is an interpretive approach to the Bible usually employed by fundamentalist or evangelical Christians. Today, 3 in 10 Americans interpret the Bible literally, saying it is the actual Word of God.